The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. 3 a.m, and I was still trying to coax life back into my 20-year-old pickup truck. The engine had been making sounds like an ailing walrus for weeks, but I couldn't afford the repair shop rates in this gentrified coastal town that used to be affordable. Through the thin walls, I could hear voices rising from inside the house. Danielle and Sophie were at it again, their argument cutting through the October night air like broken glass. "Mom, you can't keep pretending everything's fine." Sophie's voice carried that particular brand of 18-year-old righteousness that made my teeth ache. "Dad's completely clueless about what you need." I wiped my hands on an old rag and moved closer to the door connecting the garage to the kitchen. 23 years of marriage had taught me when to listen and when to walk away. Tonight felt different. "Your father is a good man," Danielle said, but her voice lacked conviction. "He works hard. He provides." "He's boring, Mom. Brad makes you laugh. He takes you places. When's the last time Dad surprised you with anything other than another broken appliance to fix?" My hand froze on the doorknob. Brad. The name hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. "Sophie, that's not fair to your father." "Isn't it?" "Mom, you're 41, not 91. You deserve to feel alive. Brad understands that. Dad he's safe, predictable, like that stupid truck he keeps trying to fix instead of just buying a new one." I looked back at my battered Ford, its hood propped open like a patient on an operating table. Safe, predictable. The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. "Brad is just a colleague," Danielle said, but I caught the hesitation. "Right. A colleague who sends you flowers and takes you to those fancy restaurants downtown. A colleague who makes you dress up and wear that perfume you only used to wear on our anniversary." The silence that followed was louder than their argument had been. I pressed my ear closer to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "Your father and I have been together since college," Danielle finally said. We're comfortable." "Comfortable is another word for settling, Mom. You're a partner at Henderson & Associates. You handle million-dollar cases, you're brilliant and beautiful, and Dad treats you like you're his roommate who happens to share a checking account." I wanted to burst through that door and defend myself, but something held me back. Maybe it was the growing certainty that Sophie wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe it was the way Danielle hadn't disagreed with her. "I love your father," Danielle said, but it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "I know you do, but loving someone and being in love with someone are different things. When's the last time Dad made your pulse race? When's the last time he looked at you like you were the most fascinating person in the room?" Another silence. This one felt like a verdict. "Brad's different," Danielle whispered, and those 2 words shattered something inside my chest. "I know, Mom, and you deserve different. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." I backed away from the door, my legs unsteady. 23 years of marriage, and my own daughter was giving my wife permission to cheat on me. Correction. Giving my wife permission to continue cheating on me. Brad Morrison. I should have seen it coming. We'd gone to high school together in this same small town. He'd been the golden boy then. Quarterback, class president, the guy who dated cheerleaders and drove his daddy's Corvette. I'd been the scholarship kid who worked weekends at the auto parts store and enlisted in the Army right after graduation. Now he was back, some hotshot real estate developer with his sights set on turning our quiet coastal town into another Martha's Vineyard. And apparently, he'd set his sights on my wife, too. I grabbed a beer from the mini fridge I kept in the garage and twisted off the cap. The metal was cold against my palm, grounding me in the moment. Through the window, I could see the lights of downtown, where old fishing warehouses had been converted into trendy lofts and artisanal coffee shops. Brad's world. The world my wife apparently wanted to be part of. My security company, Coastal Protection Services, was small-time compared to the legal empire Danielle had built. 3 employees, mostly industrial sites, and a few residential clients who wanted someone to check their vacation homes during the off-season. Honest work, but not the kind that impressed people at cocktail parties. The voices inside had gone quiet. I heard footsteps on the stairs, Sophie heading up to her room, and then the sound of Danielle moving around the kitchen, probably making herself some of that expensive herbal tea she'd started drinking lately. Another change I'd failed to notice. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text messages. The last one I'd sent her was 3 days ago. "Running late. Leftovers in fridge." Her response had been a thumbs-up emoji. When had we stopped talking to each other? The kitchen light went out, and a few minutes later I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Going to bed without saying goodnight, without checking to see if I needed help with the truck, without any acknowledgement that I existed. I finished my beer and stared at the engine block. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe I was just a guy who fixed broken things and paid bills. Maybe comfortable had become another word for invisible. But Brad Morrison was about to learn something about underestimating the quiet guy in the corner. I'd spent 4 years in the Army learning patience, strategy, and how to wait for the right moment to strike. And I was very, very patient. The next morning, I woke up on the couch in my office above the garage. My neck felt like I'd been wrestling with a crowbar, and the taste in my mouth suggested I'd had more than one beer after Danielle went to bed. The house was quiet. Danielle would have left for work by now. She was always at the office by 7, preparing for whatever legal battle awaited her. Sophie was probably still asleep. College freshmen didn't believe in mornings. I made coffee in the small kitchenette I'd installed when I converted the space above the garage into my office. It wasn't much, a desk, filing cabinets, a couch that had seen better decades, but it was mine, the one space in our lives that Danielle hadn't reorganized or improved. My phone buzzed with a text from Mick Henley, my old Army buddy who ran the MMA gym downtown. "Coffee? You look like you need to hit something." Mick had always been able to read me like a field manual. We'd served together in Afghanistan, and he'd saved my life more than once. Not from enemy fire, from my own tendency to think too much and act too little. I texted back, "Give me an hour." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The gym was in one of the old warehouse buildings that hadn't been gentrified yet. Mick had bought it cheap 5 years ago and turned it into a no-frills training facility for people who wanted to learn how to fight, not pose for Instagram photos. He was waiting for me with 2 cups of coffee and a knowing look. "You found out," he said. It wasn't a question. "Found out what?" "About your wife and pretty boy Morrison. Half the town's been whispering about it for months." I sat down hard on one of the benches. "Months?" "Jack, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. Thought you were just dealing with it your own way." "What's my own way? Hiding in my garage and pretending everything's fine?" Mick handed me a coffee. "Look, I've seen you handle worse situations. Remember that checkpoint outside Kandahar when those insurgents tried to overrun us? You didn't panic. You made a plan, you executed it, and you won. This isn't Afghanistan, Mick. This is my marriage. Same principles apply. Know your enemy, know the terrain, know your objectives." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "My objectives? What am I supposed to do? Challenge him to a duel?" "You're supposed to stop acting like a victim and start acting like the man I served with, the man who could outthink anyone when his back was against the wall." We sat in silence for a while, watching early morning joggers pass by the windows. This town had always been small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, but lately it felt like I was the only one who hadn't been paying attention. "How bad is it?" I asked. Bad enough. They've been seen at Romano's, that new place by the marina. She was at his condo last Tuesday afternoon. Her car was there for 3 hours. Tuesday, the day she'd said she was working late on the Patterson case. "Mick, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the guy whose wife cheats on him." "Then don't be that guy. Be the guy who does something about it." I finished my coffee and stood up. "I need to think." "You need to act. But when you do, be smart about it. Morrison's got money and connections, but he's soft. Always has been. And your wife? She's used to winning in courtrooms, not street fights. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm not talking about hurting anyone. I'm talking about winning." I drove around town for an hour, seeing it with new eyes. The coffee shop where Danielle had started getting those expensive lattes. The boutique where she'd been buying new clothes. The marina where Brad kept his yacht. A yacht. Of course, he had a yacht. I parked outside Henderson & Associates and watched the building. Danielle's BMW was in her reserved spot. She was up there right now, probably texting with Brad between client meetings, planning their next romantic afternoon while I fixed broken security systems and tried to keep my business afloat. My phone rang. "Danielle." "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "Jack, I'm going to be late tonight. The Morrison Development Project is hitting some snags with the zoning board." The Morrison Development Project. She was working with him professionally, too. How convenient. "No problem. I'll grab dinner with Sophie." "She's at Jessica's house tonight. Study group." So I'd be alone. Again. Probably while my wife was having dinner with her lover, discussing zoning laws and whatever else successful, exciting people talked about. "Okay. See you when you get home?" "Jack? Yeah? Are you okay? You sound different." For a moment, I considered telling her everything, laying it all out, asking her to choose, fighting for my marriage like a man who deserved to keep it. Instead, I said, "Just tired. Long night with the truck. Maybe it's time to buy a new one. Maybe it was time to buy a lot of new things, starting with a new attitude." "Maybe you're right," I said. "See you tonight?" But as I hung up, I was already planning to be somewhere else entirely. Romano's was the kind of place that charged $30 for pasta and called it authentic Italian cuisine. I'd never eaten there, couldn't afford it on a security company owner's budget, but I'd driven past it plenty of times, wondering who had money to waste on overpriced food just because it came with cloth napkins. Now I knew, my wife and her lover. I parked across the street at 6:30 and settled in to wait. The October evening was crisp, and I'd brought a thermos of coffee and a pair of binoculars I used for surveillance work. If anyone asked, I was checking on a client's property. The marina was visible from here, after all. At 7:15, Brad's silver Mercedes pulled into the restaurant's valet parking. He stepped out wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and handed his keys to the attendant like he owned the place. Maybe he did. These days, it seemed like Brad Morrison owned half the town. He walked into Romano's with the confident stride of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. I remembered that walk from high school. It hadn't changed. 20 minutes later, Danielle arrived. She'd changed clothes since leaving the office. Instead of her usual business attire, she wore a black dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was different, too, styled in a way that made her look younger, more vibrant. She looked beautiful. She looked like a woman going on a date. I watched through the restaurant's windows as they were seated at a corner table. Brad stood when she approached, pulled out her chair, kissed her cheek. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm in a gesture that was intimate and familiar. 23 years of marriage, and I couldn't remember the last time Danielle had laughed like that with me. They ordered wine. Expensive wine, judging by the ceremony the sommelier went through. They leaned across the table toward each other, talking intently, her hand covering his at one point. To anyone watching, they looked like what they were. Two successful, attractive people falling in love. My phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. "Working dinner running long. Don't wait up." Working dinner. Right. I started the truck and drove home, my mind spinning with possibilities. I could confront them, walk into that restaurant, make a scene, let everyone in our small town know that the hotshot lawyer and the golden boy developer were having an affair. But that would make me the crazy, jealous husband. The victim, the guy who couldn't keep his wife happy. I had a better idea. Back home, I went straight to Danielle's home office. She kept most of her work files at the law firm, but she had a desk here where she handled personal business. Bills, insurance, tax documents, and, apparently, burner phones. It took me 20 minutes to find it, hidden in the back of her desk drawer behind a stack of old legal pads. A cheap, prepaid phone I'd never seen before. The text messages told the whole story. Brad. Can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon. Danielle. Me neither. When can we do it again? Brad. Tomorrow? My place? Danielle. I'll find an excuse to leave the office early. The timestamps went back 3 months. 3 months of lies, excuses, and working late nights. I scrolled through the messages, each one a small knife twist in my gut. They talked about hotels, about my schedule, about how to avoid being seen together. They talked about me. Brad. How's the husband situation? Danielle. Same as always. He's completely oblivious. I could probably bring you home for dinner and he wouldn't notice. Brad. Maybe we should test that theory. Danielle. Don't tempt me. Sometimes I think it would be easier if he just figured it out on his own. Brad. Want me to leave some evidence around? A hotel receipt in his truck? Danielle. God, no. He'd probably just think it was trash that blew in from the parking lot. They were laughing at me, planning around me like I was a piece of furniture that occasionally needed to be moved out of the way. I put the phone back where I'd found it and went to my office above the garage. I needed to think, and I needed to plan. Mick had been right about knowing your enemy and knowing the terrain. Brad Morrison was rich, connected, and arrogant. He thought he was untouchable because he'd always been untouchable. Golden boys like him never learned how to fight dirty because they had never had to. Danielle was brilliant in a courtroom, but this wasn't a legal matter. This was personal, and personal fights had different rules. And the terrain? This small coastal town where everyone knew everyone's business? That could work in my favor if I played it right. I opened my laptop and started researching. Brad's development company, Morrison Properties, had projects all over New England. Big projects, expensive projects. The kind that required lots of permits and approvals and cooperation from local officials. The kind that could be derailed by the right kind of pressure applied in the right places. I also started researching my wife, 23 years of marriage, and I realized I'd stopped paying attention to the details of her career. She was a partner at Henderson and Associates, specializing in real estate law and zoning issues. Zoning issues. The same areas where Brad needed legal help for his developments. How convenient. How very, very convenient. My phone rang. Danielle. Hi, honey. I'm just leaving the restaurant. The office. Long meeting with the client. How did it go? Good. Productive. We made a lot of progress on the zoning issues. I'll bet you did. That's great. I'm proud of you. Thanks. I should be home in 20 minutes. Drive safe. I hung up and looked at my watch. If she was really leaving Romano's now, and if she drove straight home, she'd be here in 15 minutes. But the messages on her phone suggested they usually went back to his place after their working dinners. I waited. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 45. At 11:30, I heard her car in the driveway. She came into the kitchen quietly, probably thinking I was asleep. I was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and yesterday's newspaper. You're up late, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Couldn't sleep. How was your meeting? Fine. Boring, actually. Just going over contracts and permits. She moved around the kitchen, putting away her purse, hanging up her coat, avoiding looking at me directly. Must have been a long meeting. You know how these things go. Once lawyers start talking. She was lying to my face, and we both knew it. But I wasn't ready to call her on it yet. I had planning to do first. I'm going to bed, she said. Are you coming up? In a few minutes. She kissed the top of my head, a gesture that felt more like habit than affection, and headed upstairs. I sat in the kitchen for another hour, listening to the house settle around me and thinking about revenge. The next morning, Danielle was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the coffee maker. Early meeting. See you tonight? Love you. Love you. 2 words that used to mean everything and now felt like a lie she told herself to make the betrayal easier to live with. Sophie wandered into the kitchen around 10, wearing pajama pants and a college sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Morning, Dad. Morning. Want some breakfast? Just coffee. She poured herself a cup and sat across from me at the table. You look terrible. Thanks. You always know just what to say to make your old man feel better. She studied my face with the intensity that reminded me she was Danielle's daughter. Are you and Mom okay? The question caught me off guard. Why do you ask? I don't know. Things feel different lately. She's been working a lot more, and you've been spending all your time in the garage. Your mom's got a big case, and my truck needs work. Dad, I'm 18, not 8. I can tell when something's wrong. I looked at my daughter, this young woman who was smart and perceptive and about to have her world turned upside down, and I made a decision. Sophie, what would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you? She frowned. What kind of betrayal? The worst kind, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about them. I guess I'd want to know why, and then I'd probably want to make them pay for it. Make them pay for it. My daughter's moral compass was apparently more flexible than I'd thought. Even if making them pay meant other people got hurt too. Dad, what's this about? I almost told her. Almost laid out the whole ugly truth and asked for her help in planning my revenge. But she was still my little girl, even if she was technically an adult, and she didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of her parents' war. Nothing specific, just thinking about human nature. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she didn't push it. Well, if someone betrayed me, I'd want them to understand what they'd lost. I'd want them to regret it. Regret. That was exactly what I wanted. After Sophie left to meet friends, I drove to the office of the local newspaper, the Coastal Observer. It was a small operation, mostly local news, school sports, and real estate listings. But it had a website and a decent circulation. The editor, Jim Walsh, had been a client of mine a few years back when someone had been vandalizing the newspaper's office. I'd caught the culprit, a disgruntled former employee, and Jim had been grateful enough to offer me a favor if I ever needed one. Today, I needed one. Jack Brennan, Jim said, looking up from his computer. What brings you by? I've got a story tip for you about development projects and potential conflicts of interest. Jim's eyes lit up. Small-town newspapers lived for stories like that. What kind of conflicts of interest? The kind where a lawyer represents clients while having personal relationships with developers. The kind where zoning decisions might be influenced by more than just legal merit. I didn't mention names, didn't have to. Jim was smart enough to connect the dots, especially when I handed him a list of Morrison Properties projects and their approval dates, cross-referenced with Henderson and Associates' client list. "This is interesting," Jim said, studying the documents. "Where did you get this information?" "Public records, all perfectly legal to obtain and publish." "And you're bringing this to me because?" "Because I believe in transparency in local government, and because I think the people of this town deserve to know when their elected officials might be making decisions based on personal relationships rather than public interest." Jim nodded slowly. "I'll look into this. If there's a story here, I'll find it." "I'm sure you will." I left the newspaper office feeling better than I had in days. It was a small move, but it was a move, and in chess, sometimes the smallest pieces could topple the king. That evening, Danielle came home at a reasonable hour, which surprised me. She seemed nervous, distracted. "How was your day?" I asked. "Fine, busy. Jack, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Have you talked to anyone about my work lately? About the Morrison project specifically?" I kept my expression neutral. "Why would I talk to anyone about your work?" "I don't know. It's just, there were some questions today, from the zoning board, about potential conflicts of interest." "What kind of conflicts?" "Nothing serious. Just, they wanted to make sure everything was above board with our representation of Morrison Properties." "And is it?" She looked at me sharply. "Of course it is. Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering. You seem worried about it." "I'm not worried. Just annoyed that someone's stirring up trouble for no reason." "Someone? That would be me." "I'm sure it'll blow over," I said. "These small-town rumors always do." But I was counting on this particular rumor growing legs and running all over town, and judging by the way Danielle kept checking her phone throughout dinner, it already was. The story broke on Thursday morning, front page of the Coastal Observer. "Local attorney's dual role in development projects raises questions." Jim Walsh had done his homework. The article didn't directly accuse anyone of wrongdoing, but it laid out a compelling case for potential conflicts of interest. Henderson and Associates represented Morrison Properties, while partner Danielle Brennan served on the Zoning Appeals Board. Several major projects had been fast-tracked through approval processes that typically took months. The article was careful to stay within legal bounds. No direct accusations, just questions about transparency and proper procedures. But in a town this size, questions were often more damaging than accusations. I was having coffee at Murphy's Diner when I overheard the conversation at the next table. "Did you see the paper this morning?" "About the lawyer and the developer?" I always wondered how Morrison got those permits so fast. "My cousin applied for a variance on his property 2 years ago. Took him 8 months and 3 hearings. Morrison gets approval for a 50-unit condo complex in 6 weeks. Money talks, I guess. Or something else talks." They moved on to discussing the weather, but I'd heard enough. The seed was planted, and in a small town, seeds like this grew fast. My phone rang. Mick. "Nice work," he said without preamble. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Right. Buy me lunch and tell me what your next move is." We met at a sandwich shop near his gym. Mick ordered enough food for 3 people. He'd always eaten like he was still in the field, and I picked at a turkey club while I explained my strategy. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said. "What happens when they figure out you're behind this?" "They won't. Everything I gave Jim was public record. Anyone could have put it together." "Your wife's not stupid, Jack. She's going to start connecting dots." "Let her. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late." Mick studied my face. "You've changed. A week ago, you were the guy who didn't even know his wife was cheating. Now you're orchestrating some kind of elaborate revenge plot. What happened?" I remembered who I used to be before I got comfortable. And who was that? Someone who didn't let people walk all over him. That afternoon, I had a security consultation at the marina. One of my clients owned a yacht and wanted an upgraded alarm system. It was legitimate work, but it also gave me an excuse to scout Brad's boat. The Second Chance was moored in the premium section, a 40-foot sport fishing boat that probably cost more than my house. Brad was there, washing the deck and looking agitated. He'd seen the newspaper article, too. "Jack Brennan," he called out as I walked past. "Heard you were working down here today." News travels fast in a small town. He climbed down from the boat, blocking my path. Up close, he still looked like the golden boy from high school, but there were lines around his eyes now, and his smile had an edge to it. "Funny thing about small towns," he said. "Sometimes people get ideas, start spreading rumors." "Rumors about what?" "About successful people. About people who've made something of themselves." His tone was casual, but his posture wasn't. Some folks can't stand to see others doing well. "I wouldn't know. I'm just a guy who fixes security systems. Right, just a guy. He stepped closer. You know, I remember you from high school, always in the background, watching other people live their lives. And I remember you, always assuming the world owed you something just because you were born lucky. His smile disappeared. Luck had nothing to do with it. I worked for everything I have. I'm sure you did. We stood there for a moment, two middle-aged men having a conversation about high school that was really about something else entirely. How's Danielle? He asked, and there it was, the real reason for this confrontation. She's fine, working hard, as always. She's a remarkable woman, brilliant, beautiful, ambitious, the kind of woman who deserves someone who appreciates her. I appreciate my wife. Do you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you take her for granted. When's the last time you took her somewhere nice? When's the last time you made her feel special? He was baiting me, trying to provoke a reaction. The old me would have taken the bait, gotten angry, maybe even thrown a punch. The new me had a different plan. You're right, I said. I have been taking her for granted. Thanks for the reminder. That caught him off guard. He'd been expecting anger, defensiveness, maybe a fight. He wasn't prepared for agreement. I should get back to work, I said. Nice talking to you, Brad. I walked away, leaving him standing on the dock looking confused. Let him wonder what that meant. Let him worry. That evening, I surprised Danielle by making dinner reservations at Romano's. What's the occasion? She asked when I told her. Can a man take his wife out to dinner without an occasion? She looked suspicious, but she agreed. We hadn't been out together in months, and I could see her trying to figure out my angle. Romano's was busy for a Thursday night. We were seated at a table in the main dining room, visible to most of the other diners. I'd requested it specifically. This is nice, Danielle said, but she seemed nervous. I haven't been here in a while. Really? I thought you might have been here for business dinners. Once or twice, with clients. She was scanning the room, probably worried that Brad might show up. He wouldn't. I'd made sure of that by having one of my employees call in a false alarm at one of his construction sites. Nothing serious, just enough to keep him busy for the evening. The newspaper article this morning was interesting, I said after we'd ordered. Danielle's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What about it? All that stuff about conflicts of interest in local government. Makes you wonder what else goes on behind closed doors. It's all nonsense. Jim Walsh is just trying to sell papers by stirring up controversy where none exists. Probably, but it raises good questions about transparency, about people being honest about their relationships and motivations. She set down her fork. Jack, what are you getting at? Nothing specific, just thinking about trust, about how important it is in any relationship, whether it's business or personal. Are you feeling okay? You're acting strange. I'm feeling fine. Better than I have in months, actually. I've been doing some thinking about our marriage, about what we both want out of life. What kind of thinking? I leaned forward, taking her hand across the table. I've been thinking that maybe I've been taking you for granted. Maybe I haven't been the husband you deserve. She looked genuinely surprised. Jack, I want to change that. I want to be the man who makes you feel special, who appreciates how remarkable you are. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was gone quickly, replaced by wariness. That's sweet of you to say. I mean it. Starting tonight, things are going to be different between us. We finished dinner with her looking increasingly uncomfortable and me playing the role of the devoted husband trying to save his marriage. By the time we left, half the restaurant had witnessed my performance. By tomorrow, the other half of town would hear about it. On the drive home, Danielle was quiet. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what my sudden change in behavior meant for her affair. Jack, she said as we pulled into our driveway, about what you said tonight? Yes? I appreciate the sentiment, I really do. But you can't just flip a switch and change 23 years of how we are with each other. Why not? Because that's not how relationships work. You can't just decide to be different and expect everything to change overnight. Can't I? What if I told you I was willing to do whatever it takes to make you happy? She looked at me with something that might have been pity. Jack, some things can't be fixed just because you want to fix them. Like your truck? Like us. We went inside, and she headed straight upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, pouring myself a drink and thinking about her words. Some things can't be fixed. She was probably right about that. But some things could be broken beyond repair, and that was a different kind of solution entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or you'll regret it. Brad, presumably, using a burner phone of his own. I deleted the message without responding. Empty threats from a man who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. But it told me my strategy was working. He was rattled, making mistakes. And rattled people made bigger mistakes. I went to my office and opened my laptop. Time for the next phase. Morrison Properties had 3 major projects in development, worth millions of dollars in potential profit. Projects that required environmental impact studies, zoning variances, and approval from multiple regulatory bodies. Projects that could be delayed or derailed by the right kind of pressure applied to the right people. I started making a list of phone calls to make and emails to send, anonymous tips to environmental groups about potential wetland violations, questions to the State Attorney General's office about proper bidding procedures, inquiries to the IRS about tax assessments on development properties. Nothing illegal. Nothing that couldn't be traced back to a concerned citizen asking legitimate questions about public projects, but enough to tie up Brad's developments in red tape for months or even years. I was just getting started. The next morning, Danielle left early again, but this time she seemed agitated. Her phone had been buzzing with calls and texts since 6 a.m. After she left, I drove to Sophie's college campus. She was between classes, sitting in the student union with her laptop and a coffee that cost more than I used to spend on lunch. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd take my daughter to lunch. Is that okay?" She looked suspicious. Apparently everyone in my family had developed a healthy skepticism about my motives, but she agreed. We went to a cafe near campus, and I let her talk about her classes, her friends, her plans for the weekend. Normal father-daughter conversation that felt precious because I wasn't sure how many more of these we'd have once everything came out. "Sophie," I said when she paused between stories, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "Okay. How long have you known about your mother and Brad Morrison?" She went very still, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Dad, I'm not angry with you. I just need to know." She set down the cup and looked at her hands. "A couple of months. I saw them together at that new wine bar downtown. It was obvious they weren't just discussing business. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I hoped it would just burn itself out. Mom's been unhappy for a long time, Dad. I thought maybe if she got it out of her system, she'd come back to me." Something like that. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I should have told you." "No, you shouldn't have. It wasn't your responsibility." "What are you going to do?" I considered my words carefully. "I'm going to remind your mother what she's giving up. And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to make sure she regrets her choice." Sophie studied my face. "You're different, Dad. Harder." Maybe that's what I needed to be all along. We finished lunch with her asking careful questions about my plans and me giving careful non-answers. She was worried about me, but she was also curious. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. She had her mother's instincts for strategy and conflict. That afternoon, I got a call from Jim Walsh at the newspaper. "Jack, I've got some interesting follow-up information on that story we discussed." "What kind of information?" "The kind that suggests the conflicts of interest might go deeper than professional relationships." "Meaning?" "Meaning I've got 3 sources who've seen your wife and Morrison together in situations that looked more personal than professional." My stomach clenched. "What are you planning to do with that information?" "That depends. This is a small town, Jack. People know you, they like you. If I run a story about your wife's affair, it's going to hurt you too. And if you don't run it, then a public official continues to make decisions that might be compromised by personal relationships." I was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, "Jim, what if I told you there might be a bigger story here? Something that goes beyond just an affair?" "What kind of bigger story?" "The kind where public officials use their positions to benefit their lovers' business interests. The kind where zoning decisions are made in bedrooms instead of boardrooms." "You have evidence of that?" "I have suspicions, and I have the resources to investigate those suspicions." "Jack, be careful. If you're wrong, you could be looking at lawsuits for libel and slander." "And if I'm right?" "Then you've got the story of the year for a small-town newspaper." After I hung up, I sat in my office thinking about lines and how easy it was to cross them without realizing it. A week ago, I'd been a faithful husband and devoted father. Now I was orchestrating the destruction of my wife's career and her lover's business. The scary part wasn't that I was doing it. The scary part was how good I was at it and how much I was enjoying it. My phone rang. "Danielle." "Jack, we need to talk." "About what?" "About what's happening. About the newspaper stories and the questions and everything." "Okay, when?" "Tonight, after Sophie goes to bed. I'll be here." But I wouldn't be the same man she'd been lying to for 3 months. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and much less forgiving, someone who was just getting started. Danielle came home at 6:30, earlier than she had in weeks. She moved through the house like she was walking through a minefield, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Sophie was at her friend Jessica's house, working on a group project that would keep her busy until late. I'd made sure of that by volunteering to pay for pizza for the whole study group. Sometimes the best strategies were the simplest ones. "Jack," Danielle said, finding me in the kitchen where I was pretending to read the newspaper. "We need to talk." I figured. "You want some coffee?" "No, Yes. Actually, yes." I poured 2 cups and sat across from her at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years, where we'd helped Sophie with homework, planned vacations, discussed our dreams for the future. Now it felt like a negotiating table. "The newspaper story," she began, then stopped. "What about it?" "You know what about it. The questions about conflicts of interest, about my work with Morrison Properties. Seems like legitimate journalism to me. Public officials should be transparent about their relationships." She looked at me sharply. "Their relationships? Professional relationships? Business relationships? All kinds of relationships. Jack, I need you to know that everything I've done has been completely ethical. My work with Morrison Properties is strictly professional." "I'm sure it is." "You don't sound sure." I folded the newspaper and set it aside. "Danielle, I've been married to you for 23 years. I know when you're lying to me." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. She could continue the charade, or she could finally tell the truth. Her choice. "I don't know what you think you know," she said carefully. "I know about the burner phone in your desk drawer. I know about the 3-hour visits to Brad's condo. I know about Romano's and the wine bar and all the other places you've been seen together looking like more than business associates." Her face went pale. "You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention, finally." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions she didn't want to ask. "How long have you known?" she finally said. "Long enough." "Jack, it's not what you think?" "Really? What do I think?" "You think I'm having an affair. Aren't you?" Another long silence. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Yes." The word hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd known it was coming. Hearing her admit it was different from discovering it on my own. "How long?" 3 months. "Why?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Why?" "Jack, when's the last time you really looked at me? When's the last time we had a conversation about something other than bills or Sophie's college or your truck?" "So this is my fault?" "No. Yes. I don't know." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "We've been strangers living in the same house for years, going through the motions, pretending we're still in love." "I never stopped loving you." "But you stopped seeing me. I became part of the furniture, part of the routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed, day after day, year after year. And Brad makes you feel seen?" "Brad makes me feel alive. He looks at me like I'm the most interesting person in the room. He surprises me, challenges me, makes me laugh. He's also married. Separated. His divorce will be final next month." "How convenient." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "I didn't plan this, Jack. It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen. They're choices. A series of choices that led you to betray our marriage and our family." "Our family?" "Sophie's 18, Jack. She's practically an adult. And our marriage? When's the last time we were actually happy together?" "I was happy. Maybe that was the problem. I was happy with comfortable and you wanted exciting." She turned to face me. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry?" "I am sorry. Sorry that it came to this. Sorry that we couldn't find our way back to each other before it was too late." "Is it too late?" The question surprised both of us. I hadn't planned to ask it, but there it was, hanging between us like a lifeline. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I honestly don't know." "What would it take? To find out?" "Jack, I'm serious. What would it take for you to end things with Brad and try to save our marriage?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'd have to want to save it, and I'm not sure I do." The words cut deeper than her admission of the affair. At least the affair was about passion, about feeling alive. This was about something worse. Indifference. "I see." "Do you? Do you really see? Jack, we've been sleepwalking through our marriage for years. The affair didn't break us. It just made me realize we were already broken. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, my back to her, trying to process what she'd said. She was right about some of it. We had been going through the motions, letting routine replace romance, taking each other for granted. But she was wrong about one thing. The affair hadn't just revealed the cracks in our marriage, it had created them. So what happens now? I asked without turning around. I don't know. I suppose we should talk about separation. About how to tell Sophie, how to divide assets, how to make it easy for you and Brad. That's not fair. I turned to face her. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been coming to me months ago and telling me you were unhappy. Fair would have been marriage counseling or trying to work things out before you started having an affair. Fair would have been not making me the last person in town to know that my wife was cheating on me. I know, you're right. I handled this badly. You think? She sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. What do you want me to do, Jack? How do I fix this? You can't. Some things can't be fixed, remember? You told me that yourself. I was talking about us trying to recapture what we used to have, but maybe we could build something new. With Brad still in the picture? I'd have to end things with him? Would you? If I asked you to choose right now, him or me, what would you choose? She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the answer in her eyes before she spoke. I don't know. Then you've already chosen. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Danielle, I want you to think about something. You say Brad makes you feel alive, makes you feel special. But what happens when the excitement wears off? When you're not the forbidden fruit anymore? When you're just another middle-aged divorced woman dating another middle-aged divorced man? What happens when you become comfortable with him too? Maybe that won't happen. It always happens. The difference is, I loved you enough to be comfortable with you. Brad's just using you to feel young and powerful. You don't know him. I know men like him. I went to high school with him, remember? Guys like Brad Morrison don't change. They just find new ways to prove they're better than everyone else. I left her sitting in the kitchen and went to my office above the garage. My hands were shaking as I poured myself a drink, and not from anger. From something that felt like grief. She'd admitted the affair, but she hadn't apologized. Not really. She'd explained it, justified it, made it sound like a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation. And maybe it was. Maybe I'd been taking her for granted, letting our marriage slide into routine and complacency. Maybe I had stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a role. Wife, mother, partner in the business of running a household. But that didn't excuse what she'd done, and it didn't change what I was going to do next. I opened my laptop and checked my email. 3 responses to the anonymous tips I'd sent to various regulatory agencies. 2 environmental groups wanted more information about potential wetland violations in Brad's developments. The State Attorney General's office was opening a preliminary investigation into bidding procedures for public contracts. Phase 2 was already in motion. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife made her choice. Stay out of our way. Brad again. Still making threats, still assuming I was going to roll over and let him win. I typed back, she hasn't made any choice yet, but you're about to. Then I deleted his number and got back to work. The next morning, Danielle was gone before I woke up. She'd left another note. Need time to think. Staying at Melissa's for a few days. Melissa Crawford, her best friend and confidant. The one person who probably knew about the affair from the beginning and had helped cover for it. Perfect. Let them plan their next move together. It would give me time to execute mine. I called Sophie and told her that her mother was staying with Melissa for a few days while we worked through some problems. What kind of problems? She asked. The kind that adults have to figure out for themselves. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire I couldn't put out. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope not, but I honestly don't know. Is there anything I can do? Just be patient with both of us. This is hard for everyone. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and tried to remember what it felt like to be happy. Really happy, not just content or comfortable, but genuinely excited about life and the future. I couldn't remember. Maybe that was part of the problem, but I could remember what it felt like to win. And right now, winning was enough. I spent the morning making phone calls and sending emails, following up on the various investigations I'd set in motion. By lunchtime, I had confirmation that Morrison Properties was going to face serious delays on all 3 of their major projects. Environmental impact studies would need to be redone, bidding procedures would be reviewed, zoning variances would be reconsidered, months or even years of delays, millions of dollars in potential losses. Brad Morrison was about to learn that some people fought back. My phone rang. Jim Walsh from the newspaper. Jack, I've got some interesting developments on the Morrison story. What kind of developments? The kind that suggest your instincts were right. I've got documentation of zoning board meetings where your wife cast deciding votes on Morrison projects. I've got dates and times that correspond with their personal meetings. What are you going to do with that information? Run a follow-up story, unless you have objections. I thought about Danielle, sitting in Melissa's living room, planning her new life with Brad. I thought about Sophie, caught in the middle of her parents' war. I thought about 23 years of marriage reduced to a newspaper story about corruption and adultery. No objections, I said. The public has a right to know. Jack, are you sure about this? Once the story runs, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. After I hung up, I poured myself another drink and waited for my phone to ring. It didn't take long. The story ran on Friday morning with the headline, Zoning Official's Personal Relationship with Developer Raises Ethics Questions. Jim Walsh had been thorough and careful, sticking to documented facts and avoiding direct accusations, but the implications were clear enough. Danielle Brennan had voted to approve Morrison Properties projects while having an undisclosed personal relationship with the developer. The timeline of their affair coincided perfectly with the approval dates for Brad's most profitable developments. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. and didn't stop. The first call was from Danielle. Jack, what have you done? I haven't done anything. I'm not a journalist. Don't play games with me. You fed this story to Jim Walsh. I gave him publicly available information about potential conflicts of interest. What he did with it was his choice. You're destroying my career. Your affair destroyed your career. I just made sure people found out about it. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more calculating. The lawyer, not the wife. If you think this is going to make me come running back to you, you're wrong. I don't want you to come running back. I want you to understand what you've lost. What I've lost? Jack, I've lost a marriage that was already over. You've lost everything. Have I? You've made yourself look like a vindictive, jealous husband who can't accept that his wife doesn't love him anymore. You've embarrassed Sophie. You've turned our private problems into public entertainment. I've exposed corruption in local government. The personal stuff is just context. Context? Our marriage is context? Our marriage ended the day you decided Brad Morrison was more important than your family. She hung up on me. The second call was from Brad. You son of a... Good morning, Brad. How are you handling the publicity? You have no idea what you've done. I'll sue you for libel, for harassment, for... For what? Providing factual information to a journalist? Good luck with that. This isn't over. You're right. It's just getting started. I hung up on him. The third call was from Sophie. Dad, I just saw the newspaper. Everyone's talking about it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Find out what? That Mom's been cheating on you? I already knew that. I'm talking about you turning it into a public spectacle. Sophie. No, Dad. I get that you're hurt. I get that you're angry. But this is humiliating for all of us. My friends are texting me articles about my parents' marriage. Your mother made this public when she started having an affair with a public figure. And you made it worse by going to the press. I exposed corruption. You exposed our family's private business because you wanted revenge. Don't dress it up as some civic duty. She was right, and we both knew it, but I was too far down this path to turn back now. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Are you? Because it seems like you're enjoying it. The line went quiet. My daughter, the person whose opinion mattered most to me, thought I was enjoying destroying her mother. Maybe I was. Sophie, everything I've done has been to protect our family. No, Dad. Everything you've done has been to punish Mom for not wanting to be married to you anymore. She hung up before I could respond. By noon, the story had been picked up by the regional news outlets. By evening, it was trending on social media with hashtags like Such a Small Town Scandal and Jar Zoning Gate. Danielle's law firm issued a statement saying they were conducting an internal review. The zoning board announced they were recusing Danielle from all pending Morrison Properties matters. Brad's company stock price dropped 15%. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. Mick showed up at my door around 8 p.m. with a six-pack of beer and a grim expression. You look like hell, he said, pushing past me into the kitchen. Thanks for the pep talk. He opened 2 beers and handed me one. Jack, what are you doing? What do you mean? I mean this scorched earth campaign you're running. You've destroyed your wife's career, tanked her boyfriend's business, and turned your family into a tabloid story. What's the end game here? The end game is that they understand there are consequences for their actions. And what about consequences for your actions? I took a long drink of beer. What consequences? Your daughter hates you. Your wife will never forgive you. Half the town thinks you're a hero and half thinks you're a psycho. Your marriage is over, your family is broken, and you're sitting here alone in a house that's about to become part of a very messy divorce. At least I'm not the one who broke my marriage vows. No, you're just the one who burned down everything that was left. We sat in silence for a while, drinking beer and avoiding eye contact. Mick, she told me she didn't know if she wanted to save our marriage. She couldn't choose between me and him. So you made the choice for her. I made sure she understood what choosing him would cost her. And what did it cost you? I didn't have an answer for that. Saturday morning brought more phone calls, more interviews, more requests for comment. I stopped answering the phone. Instead, I drove to the marina. Brad's boat was still there, but it looked different. Someone had spray-painted "Home Wrecker" across the side in red letters. The same word I'd painted on his garage, but this wasn't my work. Apparently I wasn't the only one in town who disapproved of his behavior. I was studying the vandalism when I heard footsteps behind me. Admiring your handiwork? Brad's voice was tight with rage. I turned around. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usual polish was gone, replaced by stubble and wrinkled clothes and eyes that burned with fury. Not my work, I said, but I appreciate the sentiment. You've destroyed everything, my business, my reputation, my relationship with Danielle. I didn't destroy your relationship with Danielle. I just made it more expensive than you were willing to pay. What's that supposed to mean? It means when push came to shove, you chose your business over her, just like I knew you would. He stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You don't know anything about what I chose. I know you're here talking to me instead of standing by her side while she faces the consequences of your affair. She doesn't want to see me. She blames me for this mess. And you blame me. But the truth is, we all made choices. You chose to have an affair with a married woman. She chose to betray her family. I chose to make sure everyone knew about it. You chose to be a vindictive bastard. Maybe, but I'm a vindictive bastard whose wife isn't leaving him for someone else. He swung at me then, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him past me, then grabbed his arm and used his own weight to slam him against the side of his vandalized boat. Careful, Brad. Assault charges wouldn't look good on top of everything else. He struggled against my grip, but I'd kept myself in shape and he'd spent the last 20 years behind a desk. Let me go. Are we done here? We're done when I say we're done. I tightened my grip on his arm. No, we're done when I say we're done. This is my town, Brad. You're just visiting. I released him and stepped back. He rubbed his arm and glared at me. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Your developments are tied up in regulatory reviews for the next 2 years. Your company stock is in free fall. Your affair with my wife is front-page news. You're finished here. And what about you? What did you win? I looked at his vandalized boat, at the empty marina, at the town I'd lived in my whole life. I won the right to watch you lose. He walked away without another word, and I stood alone on the dock, wondering if that was enough. Sunday morning, I woke up in my office above the garage. I'd been sleeping there since Danielle left, avoiding the empty house and the bed we'd shared for 23 years. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. I ignored them all and made coffee. At 10 a.m., there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Sophie standing on my doorstep with a suitcase. Can I come in? Of course. She followed me into the kitchen and sat at the table where her mother and I had had our last real conversation. I left school, she said. Took a leave of absence. Sophie, you don't need to do that. This will blow over. Will it? Dad, there are memes about our family on TikTok. Someone made a remix of the news story with dramatic music. I can't walk across campus without people staring at me. I'm sorry. Are you? Really? I sat across from her and tried to find words that would make sense of what I'd done. I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire. I never wanted to hurt you. But you're not sorry about what you did to Mom. No, I'm not sorry about that. She nodded slowly. I figured. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Was it worth it? I thought about the question, about Danielle's career in ruins, about Brad's business collapsing, about my own hollow victory. Ask me in a year. I don't think I'll be speaking to you in a year. The words hit me like a physical blow. Sophie. Dad, I love you, but I don't like who you've become. The father I grew up with would never have done what you did. The father you grew up with was naive. He believed in fairness and playing by the rules and trusting the people he loved. And what's wrong with that? It makes you a victim. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the town where she'd grown up. Mom called me last night, she said without turning around. How is she? Broken. She's lost her job, her reputation, her relationship with Brad. She's talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else. Maybe that's for the best? Is it? Is driving away everyone you've ever loved really for the best? I didn't answer because I didn't know. I'm going to stay with Jessica's family for a while, Sophie continued, until I figure out what I want to do next. You don't have to leave? Yes, I do. I can't be around this poison you've created. She turned to face me, and I could see tears in her eyes. I hope it was worth it, Dad. I hope destroying Mom and Brad and our family was worth whatever you think you accomplished. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. Sophie, wait. She stopped but didn't turn around. I love you, I said. I know. But love isn't enough anymore, is it? She left, and I was alone in the house that had once been full of laughter and arguments and the comfortable chaos of family life. I poured myself a drink and sat in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of everything I'd tried to protect. Outside, the October wind was picking up, rattling the windows and reminding me that winter was coming, the season when everything dies and waits for spring. Maybe Mick was right. Maybe I'd won the right to watch everyone else lose, but lost everything that mattered in the process. Or maybe this was just what winning looked like when you played the game by different rules. Either way, it was over. Danielle was gone, Brad was finished, and I was alone with my victory. I raised my glass to the empty house. They wanted a villain, I said to no one. I gave them a legend. The wind howled outside, and somewhere in town, the people I'd destroyed were learning to live with the consequences of their choices, just like I was learning to live with mine.